Revisiting Your Family Roots. My name is Sidney Sachs, and today I'd like to welcome Jeff Miller. Jeff, welcome.
Thank you.
Jeff is the current president of the Jewish Genealogy Society of Greater Washington. It's always such a long name to say. It's much easier to say JGSGW, which of course the show's been associated with for its 11 years. So welcome, Jeff.
Thank you.
And we're going to talk a little bit about the advantages of joining a society, in particular our society. We have a monthly meeting. We always have speakers. And so we want to talk about some of the other benefits of a society. What are some of the other things, like before each meeting?
Well, there's a number of things that I think you would find beneficial to join. One is, of course, networking with the members.
Yeah.
And we introduce new members at our meetings. They get to know each other, let us know what families they're researching, where the towns are that they come from.
It's always so exciting when somebody's saying a town and somebody else will pop up, see me afterwards.
That's right, it is.
It's exciting for both the old members and the new member.
There are a number of benefits that are available only to members. For example, we have our workshops, which we hold on getting started in Jewish genealogy, on how to use the resources that are available and what to be looking for. We also have our newly relocated library, which is conveniently located in B'nai Israel. It's
not very convenient for here.
It's quite convenient to Rockville,
Yeah.
to Virginia. It's quite convenient because it's off of 270, maybe 30 minutes from Fairfax or 15 minutes from Tyson's Corner. So it's pretty convenient for anybody in the area with modern transportation. Nowadays, we also have other benefits that are available. We have our publications, the Mishpacha, which is our newsletter.
And how often does that come out?
That usually comes out about every 2 months. We have articles written by contributing members of the society. We'll have other publications such as Capital Collections, which identifies...
What is that? Yeah.
That's the resources that are available in the general area, even as far away as Richmond or Baltimore, but mostly in the Washington, D.C. area.
That started out as a few pages, as a sort of an addition to one of the conferences back in the 80s, and it's grown to be quite a book on its own at this point.
That's right.
And
in fact, the access to the various resource institutions is a benefit as well, because we can help you find the people to talk to at the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum, at the Library of Congress, at the National Archives. And we often will have guest speakers from those organizations or programs at those organizations where we may have tours or information updates.
And the Capital Collections lists all of these places, lists the times that they're open and
That's right.
so on.
That's right.
Telephone numbers if you want to call and
Sure.
Whatever. Okay, so the Capital Collections is one of the sort of ongoing things that we've had for a long time. The speakers, of course, is a monthly item. The workshops, are they now before every single meeting?
No, I wouldn't say they're at every meeting or... What we've tried to do in recent years is try to make them available conveniently for our members. For example, last year we had one in Northern Virginia at the Jewish Community Center of Northern Virginia. Sometimes we'll have them at B'nai Israel in Rockville before meetings. So it'll vary. Sometimes they're beginner workshops. Sometimes they may be specialty workshops on how to use the library resources, how to use internet resources. So it'll vary depending upon the needs.
So you're trying to help everybody across it. Now, the library itself, how many books do we have now? Or I think one of the main things is not so much the books as the one-of-a-kind materials that are in it.
It's a collection of a number of different items. So, as you say, we have tens of thousands of books, but more than that, we've got DVDs of some of these shows like today, for example. We have 300 lectures that have been recorded and transferred to DVD format. We have, and those are past programs with our speakers. We have access 13 computer workstations are in the library, so you can access the internet and some databases that we've developed over the years. We've got a map collection, a map cabinet. So there's a number of different resources that are available now in that library.
And we also have specialty kinds of things that people have donated of their own research that are not published kinds of materials that you can find anyplace else.
Well, one thing that people would like to know, I'm sure, about our organization is we're a 501c3, which means we're an incorporated nonprofit institution which does accept not only cash donations, but as you suggest, if you have collected materials important to genealogists, whether they're photographs, whether they're books, or information that you feel would be well preserved in a library for posterity, consider donating that material to our society.
Yeah. So that, and then that's all available now. And then we've also done, over the years, we've done a lot of specialty kind of projects, and that's sort of been an ongoing thing that many of the members have helped in back from the earliest, the Russian records was one of the primary things that we did, where we cooperated even with the Family History Center, and they took the photographs and we hired somebody to do the indexing.
Right.
Those were Russian consular records that, and I think we're one of the few places that has the full CD of all of the material. Well, I don't know whether we have the photographs, but we have the full index. And of course, for our 25th anniversary, we put all of that I put on it on a CD, so that's all available.
Yeah, there are a number of special binders in the library with that sort of material. One of the recent donations was related to the Jewish burials at the Arlington National Cemetery. So this is particularly interesting to those who might be interested in the military background. So we had a trip, in fact, just not too long ago, down to Richmond, and in fact there's a whole section of one of the cemeteries dedicated to Jewish burials from Civil War.
Yes, that is a fabulous little area with a special...
the barbed little...
The guns, or whatever you call it. You don't call them guns,
what
rifles.
Is it, wrought iron, right?
Yes, it's wrought iron made to look like the whatever kind of rifles that they used in the Civil War, and that's the only
Very striking.
It's the only Jewish national cemetery in the United States, and it's part of the regular Jewish cemetery.
Right.
Very, very interesting to see.
One of the interesting projects that's going on now is indexing all the grave sites in Washington, D.C., but in Richmond they're also doing a similar project, so we're keeping in touch with them so that we can make sure that our project and theirs may exchange information or whatever. So
I was surprised at the Richmond one because there was a man a few years ago who had indexed all of the Jewish cemeteries, and that material is all available at the Richmond archive. So really would be only the last 10 years that they have to do, because he did all of Virginia and went to every Jewish cemetery and indexed them. They really need to coordinate. Some of the other things that you're doing is you have a DNA group, mostly to get a discount. I don't know whether you've actually matched any family through that. I mean, within our society.
I think right now, as we continue to add new people to the database, we may indeed get more and more matching. I think what it does is it facilitates getting a group. For example, if I wanted to have my cousins and other relatives participate, it's one way that I can make sure that they get into the database through a project like this.
Through a project. Of course, anybody can get to Family Tree DNA and just get their DNA tested, and that's not going to prevent you from finding a match within somebody in our society. It's just a way of handling the money, sort of, to do it. What are the new developments?
Well, I would say one of the big items, we're going to be hosting, not too long from now, the Jewish Genealogy, the International Conference. in Washington, D.C. This is the 5th time that Washington, D.C. has hosted a conference or been involved in the planning and hosting of a conference. And what's interesting about this is that people from all over the world may come here to take advantage of the resources that we have for research, as well as to hear our speakers and network with the other people at the meetings.
Have you picked a hotel yet?
We have. We're going to be at the Grand Hyatt right downtown in Washington, D.C., very conveniently located to the various repositories, the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum, the Library of Congress, and National Archives.
I remember the first one that we did was at a little Holiday Inn, and I think we had 150 people, and we were thrilled with that, and I think we'll probably have more than 15,000 coming. 1,500.
Well, we're looking probably somewhere on that ballpark of 1,500, give or take.
Because there were 1,200 last time, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. Well, there's always different estimates that you'll get on that. Some people will come in for a day, some people will come in for the whole week. So it's a little hard to say exactly how many really were here, but sure, I'd say 1,500 may register and come for some part of the conference. And some of those will be local, of course. It's always convenient for some of the locals who've never been to a conference to come check it out to see what it's all about.
It's always so exciting. I've been to so many of them, and I was in the Chicago one this past year, and it was just so exciting, and it gives you so many ideas. Even if you don't find a match, it'll give you ideas of where to go start looking and things like that. The next one is in Philadelphia, and we'll be having somebody from there coming down and talking to us here, and I imagine talking to the society too. To be a speaker and talk to us about exactly what they're planning up there.
One of the interesting things I like to do when I first get to a conference is check out what we call the Family Finder to see are there any people registered that are researching the same names that I'm researching, or people from the same towns, so I can connect with them even sometimes right at the conference.
Well, I think the trend for something like that, too, is to get that stuff out to people beforehand, because when you get a stack of things this big, it's pretty hard to sit in your room and look through, because you want to go downstairs and see what's going on. And there is so much material that you get when you go to a conference that because you have sort of an outline of every speaker and
yeah, it helps to plan ahead of time what your strategy is. What do you want to do each day, or what do you want to accomplish, and maybe track yourself through to see what programs would be of interest.
Well, this past time, it seems to me they had the lectures online beforehand, so you could get a look at that beforehand, but you couldn't. The Family Finder and that stuff wasn't available.
Right.
And I'm sure that they'll work out things that only registrants can get into the website. And
well, we're looking for the conference in 2011 to have some aids to people for that purpose, so that you can plan more effectively to use your time to your advantage.
Yeah, either a CD or online. Personally, I prefer a CD, then I can have it when I want it. I don't have to worry about being on an online facility.
Right.
But either way, so that you can do adequate planning, because those things are, as they're getting bigger and bigger, when you have over 1,000 people, there's no way you're going to meet everybody.
That's right.
And so you really have to sort of plan out what you want to go to and who you want to see, and have good ways of communicating with the others that are going to be there.
Absolutely.
What do you have anything else that you can tell us that the Society is planning right now, or that they're doing right now? You just recently took that trip to Richmond. What other speakers do you have coming this
Well, we have a number of different programs that we're always working on for the future. For example, one of the programs that we've been looking to get might involve getting some name speakers. For example, in the cooking world, Joan Nathan is a name that comes up. We will periodically have people that not only are of genealogical interest, but of general interest in terms of social activities. And of course, cooking, we always have different recipes that people are interested in from different countries or different parts of the older pale of settlement, and people will even say, well, we make gefilte fish differently in Galicia than they did in Lithuania, and you know, you have little spicy storytelling, which helps you learn about your family background.
Okay, and I never really thought of it in that end, because my family isn't from that area, and I don't think my mother would have made either one of those.
But other speakers, for example, will always look to have a special program every June as, again, another member benefit. For example, a couple years ago, we had Flori Jagoda as an entertainer. And again, just for the members, in June, as a member appreciation, we had her entertain with her group. And we've had...
that's of genealogical value, too, because her Sephardic roots are so different, and so therefore the music is different, and she often tells the story of her life, which is very, very different from the Eastern European or even the Western European background that the majority of Jews today have. So she and her daughters are doing something very special in keeping that alive. And, yeah, I didn't mean to take on about that. What else?
But that's a good point. I'm interested in that myself, as I have one branch that supposedly has Sephardic roots. So I got more interested in researching that, and that's one of the things that you learn from joining a genealogy group such as ours. You meet with people, you learn interview techniques or experiences that people have had to expand their family trees in different ways than perhaps we had investigated on our own.
Well, I think it's interesting you say you might have some Sephardic roots. I think that the majority of Ashkenazic Jews are going to find, if we continue doing genealogy, that they do have Sephardic roots. And I think we're finding that with the DNA a lot more than we suspected. There was an article in the Smithsonian about it. Not Jewish, but this group, and we've talked about that in southern United States, it was actually in the southern part of Colorado, that these women had a lot of breast cancer, and they did the DNA study, and the only other group that has this marker is the women from Eastern Europe, Jewish women from Eastern Europe. So that, you know, if you've got such two diverse groups, they have to have come from the same source. Otherwise, they wouldn't have that same marker. And the only same source for both of these possible would be Spain. So that's why I'm saying that these the ones in the U.S. had no knowledge of being Jewish at all, because that's been lost. But they were Latino, for what we generally fall under that. And those, of course, you know, the Spaniards came up that way, the Spanish Jews, and the Eastern European Jews had to have come from somewhere. Right. So that's a pet thing of mine with the DNA lately, is that I think many, many more of us are going to find that we have these Sephardic roots that nobody has suspected.
And DNA is one way to get around one of the biggest challenges that we have, and that is surnames. Even though in Sephardic families, they had surnames many hundreds of years ago, our experts today say that they probably lost them in the interval before they appeared again in Eastern Europe about 100 or 200 years ago. So there's no way with a paper trail that you're going to be able to track 500 years of history, because you don't have that paper trail existing, and you don't know the names. So DNA may be the key to open that lock.
Yeah, one of the things about the DNA project is that they call it the surname project. Well, a project my husband started, I think, has about 15 people with 15 different last names. No one has the same name, but they all are carrying this certain identity. So obviously their common ancestor, we figure, has to be roughly 200 years ago, just before they took the last name. They all do come from the same geographical area. Yeah. But you know, the names.
Right. And in my case, very fascinating. The recent, say, 150 years that I know about in my wide DNA test was Poland, or Northeast Poland, in Ostrolanka, in the Lomża Gubernia. But when I did the DNA testing, and the people who are the closest matches to me are mostly Lithuania, which is very interesting.
Well, one person just went off in that direction.
So, but I mean, I've got at least a dozen different matches or near matches, and all of them are from a slightly different geography, but close enough to where you figure, well, there must have been some migration or something going on.
Well, I think there was a lot more communication between the various places in Eastern Europe than we think, because we think in our modern terms of getting into a car and driving 15 minutes, and if they had to walk a day, they had to walk a day. You know, I read something my great-great-grandfather wrote. He had to walk to this town to become a shochet, to be tested for it. It's a ritual slaughterer and to pass a certain test. And when I first said that to someone, they said, oh, they can't possibly walk that far. And then they sat down and figured it out. It's about 15 miles, and 15 miles a young man could easily walk in a day. So it wasn't something that was impossible, but we think of it as, oh, they couldn't have done that. But the shtetls were close enough that, you know, you found a place to lodge every evening as you walked, wherever you had to walk. And I think people did travel a lot more than we give them credit for.
Yeah, what I've found certainly is that when families would be marrying, sometimes the wife's family would be in a different shtetl from the husband's, and sometimes the new family unit would then move to that location, and you'd have connections between these different towns because of these intermarriages.
And you also had to have, and I'm not sure how it worked in Eastern Europe, but in Germany you had to have permission to get married. So that you very often had Jewish marriages that were never registered as legal marriages until many, well, I know that from Eastern Europe, that the records show that a couple got married and had 5 kids. Well, they didn't have those illegally, except the way the federal government or whatever their local government felt. By Jewish law, they had certainly been married by a rabbi and would have considered themselves married until some time that it became important that they were married legally or by the government or so on. So there's all sorts of things that we have to find out.
Right. Yeah, we learned so many things that are important, or we consider them more important here, but that weren't all that important then.
Yeah.
I mean, for example, birthdays. I mean, they probably knew generally when they had been born, but it wasn't an important thing. We made a big ritual out of celebrating birthdays here, and for example, my grandmother took a birthday just because arbitrarily she decided that was a good date. Well, when I did the research and got the records from Lithuania, she was actually born at least 3 years earlier than what she claimed as her birthday here in the U.S.
Well, there was other reasons for that, too. We know that somebody, I've said this often, she only gained 7 years every 10 years in the census because women did not want to admit how old they were, too. So that could account for those 3 years, too. Particularly as immigrants came to this country, of course, they wanted to be a minor, or they didn't want to be a minor. They were traveling. They were very young. They made themselves older so that they would be allowed to enter. You know,
various reasons that they would have changed. Sure.
It didn't matter to them particularly.
Right. Exactly. It wasn't a big deal.
So, okay, let's get back to the societies. What else? I think we've mentioned most of the things. The capital collections, let's go back to that a little bit. That's a very useful...
yes, if somebody wants to do research, usually one of the things they want to know is, well, what's the best way for me to use the resources that are available? And
I want to say also that's not, it includes Jewish, of course, but it includes all of the other things, Library of Congress, archives.
That's right. I mean, we've got so many resources available. You know, it's kind of funny, when I was in college, I had a summer job working in the Library of Congress, and of all areas, the genealogy collection.
And you didn't realize
And at that time, I was not a genealogist or interested in that subject, but it was kind of ironic that years later, I'm now interested in Jewish genealogy.
And you were there all the time and could have done it if you had thought about it. Now, is that, you sell that separately, or is that part of the membership when you join?
When you join, what you get is the opportunity to buy it at a member rate. And then, of course, as I mentioned earlier, you will also have, through networking, through seminars that you may attend, more ideas about how you can use those resources effectively. We'll hear from speakers. We may have some special programs at the archives or at the Library of Congress to use some of their resources. So we have many different ways that you will learn about those resources.
You know, some of the other things that are listed in there are like the Veterans Association, the American Jewish Veterans.
Right. There's some sources that people may not even be familiar with.
There's German, archives and things like that in D.C. There are many sources. I haven't looked at it recently. I don't know if I have the very most recent copy, but there were so many things that you wouldn't ordinarily think of as even being genealogical resources that they have listed in there that are perhaps more special to one person or the other. Maybe you won't use 90% of it, but that 10% that you might want, or even that one item that you come across. Right.
Well, you mentioned earlier, for example, some of the records that the State Department keeps. They have passport records. They have other records, and some of these records are down at the National Archives, but some of them are in what they call the Archives 2. And some people don't even know that there is an Archives 2, and it's out in College Park, Maryland, nowhere right downtown. It's out in the suburbs.
And the Archives 2 has records of what went on in China in World War II, and they have those records, and it's incredible the kinds of records that our archives has that most people don't even know about, because I did research for a friend of mine from Australia, and it listed all of the people in the community and what schools the kids were in and what songs the school was singing. This was in China, in Shanghai during World War II, because somehow the U.S. got a hold of those records and they're out there. So unless you know sometimes where to look, and that's where society can help you. Or when you're stuck, you ask one of the you have experts.
That's right. We'll have what we call brick wall sessions and that sort of thing, where we may have one table on Lithuanian research and another on Galician research and Polish and so on, and we'll have experts at each table helping people get going or get through brick walls. Okay.
Thank you very much, Jeff, for coming, and I hope people have learned a little bit about societies, and we did get off a little bit.
My pleasure.
Thank you.